How old are you?
33.
As of writing, I am 33 years old. Although not old enough to have excitedly played an Atari 2600 first time round, I've lived through gaming's cultural ascendancy to the mainstream and been absolutely obsessed with it since I played Castle of Illusion and Double Dragon on my cousin's Sega Master System. Where many of my friends played games excitedly as kids, before finding other supplementary or even replacement hobbies as they grew up, I doubled down to embrace the future of video games as well as their history. I've tried, as far as is possible, to keep up with modern trends and development, as well as looking back to round out my own knowledge of individual genres or franchises' lineages. I love video games, and perhaps you do too. Nintendo's Labo series of constructible cardboard creations that pair with the unique hardware of the Switch has consistently impressed me. Even if I may not be the target demographic, there is a Lego thrill to building something almost entirely from sheets of cardboard that then becomes an interactive toy by way of some sort of digital witchcraft. The most recent Labo VR kit is perhaps Nintendo's best yet. It takes the modest hardware of the Switch, pairs it with the franchise's usual bananas constructions, and somehow produces virtual reality experiences that compete with tech of vastly higher fidelity and quality. It does this through the simple act of pairing arcade-style experiences to satisfying peripherals. And remarkably, this is something that Nintendo has already been doing for over 30 years. In this episode of You Might Know This, But You Didn't Know That, we'll be looking at some of Nintendo's first-party attempts to marry virtual gunplay and bespoke hardware or peripherals. We start, of course, with Duck Hunt. But you already knew that. Duck Hunt helped launch the NES in the USA. Here's a gun. Here's some ducks. You know Duck Hunt because you probably played Duck Hunt, or seen someone play Duck Hunt, or heard someone reference Duck Hunt in popular media. Ducks are released, ducks are shot. The dog remains smug. The NES Zapper would be compatible with a handful of other games for the platform, but given limitations of the hardware of the time, few games went that much further than the shooting ranges of Duck Hunt or Hogan's Alley. Fast forward to the Snares, and Nintendo felt it appropriate to upgrade their plastic firearms from a space-age pistol to a full, over-the-shoulder bazooka, replete with sight as well as wireless functionality. The Super Scope sold relatively poorly and was supported by few games. Of course, no title could really live up to the expectations set by a 2-foot-long rocket launcher analogue, but Nintendo certainly gave it a bash, with the ridiculous Yoshi's Safari. Making use of the Mode 7 scaling capabilities of the Snares, Yoshi's Safari has you take the role of Mario, sat atop Yoshi, as you wander through mazy paths, firing nondescript balls at the antagonistic denizens of the Mushroom Kingdom. The Koopa Kids pop up as bosses. Branching paths and a high score table offer some replayability. But really, this is pretty standard fare. The sense of movement, of forward progress, certainly adds to the Duck Hunt formula for sure, and the more heavy-duty hardware you're using to interact with the game, or a Wiimote if you're playing via emulator in 2020 like a dirty pirate, definitely adds to the sensification that the experience conveys. Arcades of this era were still about spectacle, and this transposition of a chunky, plastic, interactable weapon helps lift up what is otherwise one of Nintendo's weakest mascot efforts. Skipping the N64 and GameCube entirely, Nintendo wouldn't explore the arcade peripheral shooter again properly until a few oddball efforts on the Wii. Say hello to the revised Zapper. This plastic shell could accommodate a Wiimote and nunchuck, and was bundled with Link's crossbow training as a pack-in to help sell the peripheral. The game takes a Twilight Princess themed Link and asks that he attempt a variety of crossbow trials set across locations dotted about Hyrule. The key word here is variety. Whilst most of Nintendo's efforts to date have been pretty straightforward, the missions here may ask you to shoot targets from set vantage points, spin 360 degrees to ward off approaching foes, or in the game's most exciting set pieces, move freely around an area using the analog stick of the nunchuck, taking down enemies using the Wiimote's pointer. It can be genuinely gripping stuff, with medals awarded for feats of scoring up to a coveted platinum. The game's scoring system has reasonable depth, with combos allowing you to boost your score multiplier as you play. Cleverly, most stages have additional level furniture like pots or scarecrows which can be shot for minimal score, but as a means to raise your multiplier, so that the next actual target you hit is worth far more. Skulltula, Bokoblin, pot. Bokoblin, Zalfos, another pot. Like Yoshi's Safari and Duck Hunt before it, Link's crossbow training is not world changing, but it again taps into the visceral enjoyment that comes with a more direct connection between you as a player and the action happening on the screen. The plastic Wii Zapper trigger is satisfying to click, even if all it's really doing is squeezing down on the B button of the Wiimote. And the ability to access the analog stick and buttons on the nunchuck makes me a little sad that so few games utilise this control scheme. I believe some of the Call of Duty ports on the Wii essentially used this style of input, with the analog stick controlling movement and the pointer controlling aiming, but it's Call of Duty, isn't it? I've seldom cared less about the Call of Duty franchise than when it was ported almost entirely out of cynical, moneyed obligation to the underpowered Wii. Maybe they are fantastic games, or maybe you should just stick to chasing high scores on Link's crossbow training. The 7th generation of consoles, being the generation led by the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 and the Wii, represented many things. For this entry into Nintendo's weird relationship with gun games though, we look primarily to the generation's move towards online functionality and digital delivery. Whilst each platform holder interpreted the idea of an always online digital storefront differently, it's hard to argue that the WiiWare indies of Nintendo's motion sensing console were the pick of the bunch, especially when viewed alongside the indie darlings of the 360 or PlayStation 3. File size limitations owing to a lack of onboard storage on the Wii itself meant that many releases were slimmed down and forced to make use of weaker or repeating assets. In some cases they were hobbled in other ways. The titles that stood out, predictably, were arcade-centric action games that encouraged score chasing and replayability. Eco-shooter Plant 530 is a bonkers title developed in collaboration between Nintendo and Fire Emblem's Intelligent Systems. In it, you don the boots of a construction worker whose sole job is to repel a strange alien invasion of tin cans. Is it a game with a loose environmentalist message, like Awesome Possum, Echo the Dolphin or Global Gladiators before it? Who knows? But it is an on-rails shooting gallery that again encourages the use of the Wii Zapper to make you feel like you're really giving those cans a good old hiding. The game is slow-paced and features a strange system whereby each can must be killed and then recycled by hoovering it up. Your ammunition is tied to how much you hoover, with this value also representing your health. The stages themselves play out reasonably simply, but the boss encounters at the end of the 3 stages are all a bit of a trudge, with enemies seemingly taking thousands of hits, moving a little bit too fast for the Wii pointer to keep up with, and forcing you to hoover continuously in order to maintain a healthy stock of energy. Eco Shooter is probably the weakest game on this list so far, and perhaps fittingly, it's also a curio very unlikely to see the light of day again, owing to the Wii Shop's closure a couple of years ago. Ah, the 3DS, one of my honest-to-goodness favourite handhelds. Despite not being a console I would play for hundreds of hours, outside of a few choice games, naturally, the 3DS was unequivocal from its announcement through to the release of the 2DS refresh that it was a toy first and foremost. It had great games and was backwards compatible with the regular DS to bolster this library of great games still further, but the highlight of the console's now fading lifespan, for me at least, was turning on my launch day unit, being directed to turn the 3D slider to full, and then watching the beautiful Nintendo logo protrude from the screen. I've already mentioned in this video that a big part of peripheral success comes down to instilling spectacle. Games like Guitar Hero or Dance Dance Revolution found themselves the centre of house parties because of their almost ceremonial draw. The 3DS and its glasses-free stereoscopic 3D remains the most mind-blowing piece of individual technology I've ever seen. Installed on the console itself were a number of applications that pushed the idea that this was a device built for play. Face Raiders is an augmented reality first-person shooter that has you photographing the faces of friends, family or celebrities, top marks if you've noticed the beaks of Mylene Klass and Jack Nicholson in this relatively ugly footage grabbed from my console, and you shoot these faces with coloured balls. This weird, throwaway, pre-installed oddity has clear lineage to the Game Boy camera and its built-in games that also allowed you to digitise real-world people, but it also links to many of the games we've looked at in this episode. Face Raiders is built on arcade constructs, scoring and presentation. It features a handful of stages that can be replayed for higher scores and simple unlockables. Face Raiders showcases a developer embracing physical technology, here both the camera and the 3D functionality of the handheld, to bolster a player's experience. It is big, stupid fun. Finally, we move to the much maligned Wii U. Even if the public didn't embrace the console whatsoever, owing to confused marketing and a mid-gen launch that still inexplicably had a machine trailing the 360 and PlayStation 3 in power, there are still a good few reasons to dig out your weird proto-Switch. Nintendo Land, the pack-in title that famously wasn't a pack-in, featured a selection of minigames that aimed to sell newcomers to the console's unique capabilities and potential for off-screen, asymmetrical multiplayer. For us though, we're going to ignore many of the games included, even if the F-Zero and Balloon Fight spin-offs were actually pretty fun, and focus instead on the arcade shooter Takumaru's Ninja Castle. There's no gun peripheral or Zapper style sheath here, just the Wii U's chunky gamepad and stylus. Using the gyrometer in the pad to aim, you flick away from your body using your stylus to release throwing stars to take down the game's many foes. There is none of the inventiveness or playfulness of Face Raiders here, none of the precision of Link's crossbow training, not even any of the weirdness of Eco Shooter, outside of the fact that Ninja Castle is based on a Famicom Disk System game that never left Japan. But it does exist, and is at least notable for being Nintendo's first high-definition effort at a peripheral-based shooter. The Labo VR kit is legitimately fantastic, and perhaps the strongest entry in this weird family tree. From Duck Hunt Zapper to Labo Cardboard Blaster. Please Nintendo, keep being Nintendo.